All right, here we go. We have WWE Hall of Famer, former Olympian Mark Henry's in the building.
In the building. What's up, baby?
What's up, man? Pleasure to have you here.
Oh man, you come highly recommended.
Thank you. Thank you. I try. We actually just interviewed Dr. Khan, who was on your show as well.
Yes, sir. I met him so long ago, but it feels like I was yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're definitely appreciative that he can come on the show and give the real medical knowledge with all the craziness that's happening right now with COVID-19. To have an actual medical doctor on the front lines telling people what's going on
Yeah,
was a huge blessing.
and to have a pulse in the hip hop field and be relevant, it's just priceless to have somebody like him.
No doubt. No doubt. Well, I want to get into your whole story. And this is our first time actually sitting down, so I want to start in the beginning.
Yeah.
So you grew up in Silsbee, Texas?
Silsbee, Texas, man. More animals than people.
Okay.
There's 3,000 people in the town I grew up in.
Okay. And I guess you come from a family where all the men are just huge. Is that accurate?
It's pretty accurate. Actually on both sides of my family. I've had people play in the NFL. Of course, the accomplishments that I've made, and you go back to the 40s and 30s. I had uncles that worked in the pulpwood industry, which is logging, and they were pretty famous for kind of their exploits. Being big guys, handling really heavy implements.
Right. I guess you had a great uncle named Chud,
Chud
who was
Adams.
6'7" and weighed 500 pounds.
He was close to 5. He wasn't quite 5, but he was close. And he never wore a pair of shoes. He never had shoes. They said he probably had like a 17, 18 size foot. He never had a pair of shoes. He always wore either moccasins, which was basically his foot covered in leather and they, laced it around, or he would, just walk around barefoot.
Okay, now you yourself, by the time you were in 4th grade, you were 5'5" and weighed 225 pounds.
Yeah, and
That's crazy. 225 in the 4th grade.
yeah, and I got a son right now that's 6 feet tall and 230 pounds, and he's in 8th grade.
Okay, what was it like to just interact with kids when you were like 3 times their size?
You know what? I got a lot of back then. Why is he playing with my kids? And they were like, he's the same age as your kids, and they'd be like, oh. Okay, but I never had other than stuff like that, I never had no problems because everybody knew who I was. Everybody knew my family, and they were very aware that where I came from.
Okay, I mean, most kids get into fights throughout elementary school, junior high, high school. Was anyone actually willing to fight you when you were in school?
You know what? I had a couple of scrapes, but not very many. I grew up with Debo in my house. My brother was the real live Debo, so everybody was afraid that if they, mess with me, that my brother was going to kick their ass. And then it got to the point to where I probably got in the 7th grade, and he was like, "Look, man, you got to fight your own battles." And I think I got into maybe like 2 fights. And I kind of bludgeoned a kid, and then it was like, okay, you know what? You do that again, we're gonna have a problem. And I ended up getting kicked out of school because I beat a kid up, and I spent a little time in the box, what they called it, but juvenile detention. But a lot of that was anger issues. During that time, kids were calling me Fat Albert, Magilla Gorilla, you name it, Super Black, you name something that was derogatory, I was getting it. And when you're a little kid and nobody tells you how to deal with pain or deal with any kind of struggle, and you trying to handle it with your fists.
Okay, so you actually got expelled from school from fighting?
Yeah, a couple of times. And the last straw, um, it spilled out after we got out of school. I got off the bus, and a kid was waiting on me to hit me with a stick. And, I kind of rubbed his face in the ground, and it didn't come across like I was in danger. I mean, he the one had a stick. He just, swung and missed. And that's usually how most fights end. You swing, you miss, you get caught. And now I'm the bad guy. So, at that point it was like you're no longer welcome, in school. You got to do alternative school. And I was already a bad student because I was an undiagnosed dyslexic. And it was actually a blessing in disguise because that was the same time that organized sports got introduced to me. Um, and if you say, look, if you can't pass and if you can't stop fighting, then you can't play. And I was like, damn, I can't play. I mean, he started it, and they was like, look, I don't care who started it. If you hit somebody, you're done. And that was the beginning of me conforming to the system.
I mean, here you are in East Texas, and this is 70s and 80s. Was there a lot of racism that you dealt with during that time?
I mean, I dealt with racism, but just like any kind of arguments, I dealt with racism with my fists. I couldn't fight the whole world, so I had to learn how to politically make that not a problem. And as you know, when you're blessed and you're special and you show the aptitude to doing big things, you run into less racism than everybody else. I'm sure that you being from Russia, you face your share of criticisms and biases, especially being in the hip hop world and being in the arts. So your culture treated you probably different, and then the people that wasn't used to you treated you different, and it was the same for me. I got treated different on both sides, and I always called it greatness hate. And uh, Michael Jordan faced it. List of professional athletes have faced it. Musicians, artists, anybody that's had some level of success, whether it's local success or international success, you're going to deal with biases and prejudices.
Well, by the time you're 18 years old in high school, the LA Times called you the world's strongest teenager. And I guess you had won the National High School Powerlifting Championship. And you actually set a record at that point for the
Yeah,
squat. Uh, how did it feel to be called the world's strongest teenager? I mean, that just sounds insane when you say it out loud.
man. Let me tell you how important that was for me. I live in Texas, and from the time that you can hold a ball, they start telling you you're going to be a football player. You got to play football. You got to play football. And when it got to my junior year and my senior year, I realized that it was more important for me to be a lifter than it was for me to play football. And I had coaches tell me, you're going to have to make a decision because if you get hurt playing football and the Olympic Committee is pouring money into you to get you educated, housed, and fed, um, it's not going to work out. And I gave up football. That's how much I love the lifting arts.
Okay. And you were a three-time Texas State champion
Yeah.
in four powerlifting categories: squat, bench press, and deadlift.
And the
Uh,
total.
there we go. Yep.
And the reason that it
Okay.
wasn't four times is because when I was a freshman, we didn't have a team. And the lifts that I did as a freshman were better than what they did at the state championship.
Okay. So you're already at the top of your game by the time you're 18.
Right.
So then you finish high school, and at 19, the Summer Olympics are around the corner, the 1992 Summer Olympics, and you actually make it on the team for the U.S.
Well, I had to switch sports. During that time, I went from powerlifting to Olympic weightlifting, which is completely different. It's a more athletic and a more technical sport. A lot of technique and keeping the bar close to the body to be really explosive and fast. And you have to be flexible to get into positions to catch it. And it took me 9 months of training for this brand new sport that I had never did before to qualify for the national team, get invited to live at the Olympic training facility. And then 11 months later, I came in 10th place in the Olympic Games after less than a year being in the sport.
Were you upset that you went to the Olympics and didn't get a medal?
Not at all, because I knew right away from my coaches and trainers that I wasn't going to win. They was like, it's good to have hope. It's good to work like you want to be champion, and that's what it's going to take for you to get there. He said, but you compete against people that cheat. And we knew they cheated. And Eastern Bloc countries, you know, they really promoted the guys to do drugs. You know, I had guys tell me, look, man, stop complaining about the drugs. You're going to bring heat on us and they're going to kick the sport out of the Olympics. I was like, you fucking stop taking steroids. And it was a back and forth for a while. And then eventually, you know, I just got tired of it. And after the 96 Olympic Games, when I was not even in my prime yet, then I stepped away and started pro wrestling.
Okay. And I guess at the 96 Olympics, you ran into Michael Jordan.
Yep. Got to meet the great Michael Jordan.
Right. Didn't go too well, though.
Not at first. And the story, the way the story goes is Michael asked, who are you? Because I didn't fit in. You know, I was in an environment where it was all basketball players. And he was like, who is this big guy? And I understand that. But my mother used to say, be careful what you say, but even be more careful of how you say it. And the way that he said it to me was very disrespectful, I thought. And I checked him about it, and he apologized. Hell, he invited me to his birthday party at the All-Star game. And I went to his birthday party and, you know, said happy birthday and thanks for the invite and had a good time and took my ass home.
Gotcha. That would have been interesting. A Mark Henry, Michael Jordan fist fight at the Olympics.
It wouldn't have been interesting. that would not have been interesting.
International news.
Oh, it would have made world news, but it wouldn't have looked good for me.
Okay, so you continued to do a bunch of powerlifting and weightlifting and strongman competitions, and you were getting a bunch of records in, I guess, the drug-free competitions.
Yeah, I only competed in drug-free meets.
So I'm not very familiar with this part of the game here. So they have a drug-free competition and a take as many drugs as you want competition?
Well, it's not so much take as many drugs as you want. It's just that they don't test. And everybody know that they're not going to get drug tested. So they're not going to compete in the competitions against people that don't do steroids unless they're just completely immoral and have no ethics whatsoever, which there were some of those guys that would use the fake pee devices, and they would drain their bladders and stuff, and then fill their own bladders with other people's urine. I mean, I've seen it all. I've heard it all, and I competed against these people, and I heard the stories. They like, hey, he's a cheat. He's a cheat. That dude is definitely cheating. And I was always, hey, I got enough pee for everybody. If you want me to drug test today, I drug test today. 5 minutes, an hour from now, 2 days from now, whenever you want it, you call the shot. And it actually got to be a hazard, because once I said that, people started testing me more because they wanted to actually see if I was dirty or not. And between the 95 and me competing at the Olympic Games, almost a calendar year, I took 19 drug tests. And there's been no athlete on earth that's been drug tested that many times in a calendar year. None.
Did you consider taking steroids at one point?
Never.
So you could start winning every time?
Never. I was winning in America, which was the most important to me, and to be the world's strongest, to come in 10th and be the 10th best player in the world in the Olympic Games and not to cheat. If you was to say, the scientists say that if you take anabolic steroids or growth hormone, it'll give you between 30 and 37% improvement. If I would have taken the drugs and I was 37% stronger than I already was, I would have won the Olympics by snatching 500 and clean and jerking 620. Everybody would have known that I was not human. And I'm gonna tell you something else about the steroids. 3 of the guys that I competed against that actually won the Olympic Games, 3 out of the 5 guys, they're dead. They're not here. They would be the same age as me, and I smoke an occasional cigar, but you'll never find a 330-pound guy that has a low blood pressure, no hypertension, no physical ailments other than my back is destroyed and I'm gonna have surgery when I get really old. I could take off and run a mile in under 10 minutes. I still train. I don't train to lift heavy weights. I train to stay healthy, to stay alive. And I almost feel sympathy for the people, that they was misled into thinking that an accomplishment in competition was greater than life. And you look at all of what's going on in this world right now. The world, not in America, in the world. And you see how many people are dying and suffering, how much pain, how much agony that's going on. And you mean to tell me that now there's no football, there's no basketball, baseball, golf, marbles, tiddlywink, soccer, whatever sport that you play, there's none of it. What's the most important thing? Health. And I thank God every day that I had Christian people and smart people around me that said, Mark, it's not worth it. And even if somebody would have said, Mark, look, nobody will ever know. Here, take this. If I'd have had somebody like that around me, I wouldn't have listened to them. That's just never been me. So, me being in the situation that I am now, I feel like I won. I didn't win a medal, but when you add all of the strength sports combined, there's no human that's ever done collectively what I've done. And being considered, the strongest man that ever lived is more important to me than being the strongest in one of the events that I competed against. I've been world champion in 2 of the 3 sports. And it wasn't just about how strong I was, it was about how explosive I was and how athletic I was. And that's more important. Olympic weightlifting, you have to be a good athlete, period. Flexible, strong, and when speed and strength are combined, you create power. And even if I wasn't the strongest athlete that ever lived, which I think I fit that bill too, but I was definitely the most powerful.
Well, up to 1996, you weren't really thinking about becoming a professional wrestler.
I didn't even know it was possible. I just was a fan. I was just, as a little kid, I watched the WWE cartoon. I watched Monday Night Raw all the time. I watched the pay-per-views, and I grew up in Central Texas, or in Southeast Texas, and my grandmother would take me to watch the wrestling matches. That was me and my grandmother's thing. Nobody else in my family were wrestling fans. It was just me and her. And even today, I'm a 47-year-old man, about to be 48. And I still, every time I watch wrestling, I think of my grandma. It's the best gift that she could ever gave me.
When you were watching it back then, did you wonder if it was real or fake, I guess is how you would say it?
I would beat you up if you was here in person. No, wrestling is not fake. It's predetermined. It's a difference. We
Right.
know what's going to happen, and it's complicated. The best guys, you have to. It's not governed by how mean you are, or how cunning, or how skilled you are. It's about, can you emotionally get people to believe in your ideals, the psychology of what wrestling is. And a lot of people, consider me to be a great psychologist, as well as the fact that I was a great athlete. So I've been really, really blessed. This is not a, hey, Mark, pat yourself on the back thing. It's reality. And every wrestler that has ever been great, that have been world champion, they had to master the psychology part of it. I had good teachers, but a good teacher is nothing without a willing student. And I wanted to be good at everything. I'm very competitive. Hey, if somebody say, man, I bet I can beat you running, I'm like, really? Well, shit, let's go see. I'm competitive like that. And when I got into wrestling, I wanted to be really good. I wanted people to cheer for me. I wanted people to hate me. And if that was what the role was for me to fit. And I was able to accomplish that. I mastered psychology, and I was able to go into the wrestling industry and carve a niche out for myself when I had no background in mixed martial arts. I had no background in acting. I had no background in pro wrestling, and I was still able to be the best in that world. And man, I'm proud of that.
Well, I mean, a lot of guys, to get into wrestling, they start with these kind of backyard leagues and work their way up and spend years and so forth. But in 1996, Vince McMahon calls you up and flies you out, and now you're suddenly in the WWE, which is the height of the height when it comes to wrestling.
Yeah.
How did it feel? How did it feel to first join the league?
You know what? At that time, I made my mind up that I was not going to compete in Olympic weightlifting anymore. And when I made in my mind not to compete in Olympic weightlifting, I was like, I can't just sit at home. I was going to go back and play football. I went to the Cowboys training camp. I talked to Bob Young, who was offensive line coach for the Houston Oilers, and got a workout. And I worked out for Jim Hannafin at the Redskins. And about that time, Vince McMahon called and said, man, I heard you like wrestling. I was like, hell yeah. And he was like, well, I want you to come and see how we do things. And I had to seem like the biggest fan in the history of fans that ever walked in Vince McMahon's office with the intent on being a wrestler, when all I could do was walk around his office going, are these really Andre the Giant's boots? Oh my God, is that Hulk Hogan's shirt? I was just the biggest fan. And I'm still the biggest fan. I love pro wrestling. I watch about 13 hours of pro wrestling a week. Between Busted Open, the show that I do on Sirius XM, where we're on 6 days a week, and I'm on Fox Sports 1 on Backstage, and I have a show called Not a Sports Show. It's not a sports show. We make jokes about the name. We try to mess it up as much as we can. But if you go to @NotASports1 on YouTube, then we have a really high level show that's geared around not being a sports show, even though we talk sports. But I talk to people like you. I'm interested in you. I'm interested in what makes the world better, what makes the world interesting. And that's something that I feel like is what I got from pro wrestling. It educated me on an international level. I don't think about my neighborhood or my state or even just my country. I think about how what I do affects people. I've had people from Russia, from Asia, from Africa, Mexico, you name a place. And they say, hey man, if it wasn't for you in pro wrestling, I don't know what I would have done with my life. Like, you made me want to work out and be a strongman, a power lifter, a bodybuilder, or whatever. You made me want to be an actor. You made me, and I feel like that's what wrestlers do over any other sport. You look at the world right now. There's no other sports that are live on television. Pro wrestling is. And that's the difference. Pro wrestling is a different animal.
Okay. So now you're all into your wrestling career, and you're doing this full time. Now, right around 2003, you come back to WWE under the Raw roster, and you were part of a crew called Thuggin' and Buggin' Enterprises. And there was a storyline in there where basically you guys felt you were victims of racism and being held down by the white man. When you look at this through a 2020 lens, what do you think about it?
You know what? I look at it as a storyline. It was something that was prevalent, and it's still prevalent. There'll always be biases. There'll always be prejudice. There'll always be racism. It's how you deal with it. On a TV show, you can fight people and beat people up for it. In the real world, you have to be able to create policies that change who's in power and change the racism, change the prejudice from that standpoint. That's what I've done. I've done my best to, anytime that there was something that dealt remotely with racism, whether it be in strength world, pro wrestling, entertainment, in my private life, I make it noted. I'm not going to have it. And there's only room enough for right. And if I'm right, that means your ass got to go.
Well, there was a storyline at one point. I guess it was a silverback gorilla type thing.
Which I didn't like, and which I said to the writers, you will not refer to this black man as a silverback. I am not a primate.
And they took it out.
And the shit stopped.
This whole thing is run by Vince McMahon.
Well, Vince was the one that was like, look, if you feel that way, then tell them that that's not what you want to be portrayed as. And I said, well, I don't want to be portrayed as that. He said, okay, it's killed. And I went from being the silverback to being Mark Henry, the strongest man in the world. And primarily because I took time to stop pro wrestling and to go back and compete against the strongest men in the world to validate the fact that I was the world's strongest man, not the world's strongest primate. And it was a big success. It took me through 2014 or 2011 is when I really got into the Hall of Pain era. And from 2011 to 2015, I dominated pro wrestling. And it's hard to say that you dominated pro wrestling when you have all these unbelievably great and unbelievably talented people that you're competing against and that you're performing with. And I was able to do both.
Once you really started getting to the top of your game, the money started coming with it. What really changed in your life? Because you're coming from East Texas. I assume your family was not wealthy during that time.
You're right. My mother never made more than $12,000 in a year.
There you go. And now you're making millions of dollars. What changed in your life once the money started coming?
My circle changed. I lived a little careless. I played in the streets a lot. I hung out at every club in New York City, Houston, Atlanta, Los Angeles. I was partying hard. But, once I had a kid, it all changed for me. My focus was not on myself, but I started thinking about legacy. I started thinking, what was I leaving behind? How do I want to be portrayed in front of my kid? Stuff that I had never thought about before. And that was the biggest change in my life. And even now, every morning I wake up, the first thing I think of is what are me and my kids going to do?
Well, the first time I started making money around 2000, I fucked it all up. And I had to start over and rebuild. When you first started making money, did you fuck it up or were you smart with your money the whole time?
Oh man, I screwed up a bunch. There was a time when I would leave my house and I would not come back to my house for a month, living in hotels, taking limos. I was a full-fledged star, man. I lived it. I wasn't quite Ric Flair. I wasn't Learjet flying, but I was limousine riding, and I was eating in restaurants that you got to pay big money to get into, and you got to be on a waiting list. I skipped the waiting list. I was Mark Henry.
What do you think was your most foolish purchase? If you could look back at all the stuff you bought and say, man, I wish I hadn't spent money on that.
I think the biggest regret is all the girls I put through college in the strip clubs. I put a lot of people through college, man. I was like not the United Negro College Fund, but I was close.
So you would hook up with girls in the strip club and pay for their college?
Oh man, I'm kind of being an ass, but I just spent a lot of money balling, man. If you bought 2 bottles, I bought 2 bottles. And I don't even drink alcohol. I bought more alcohol, I bet, in my life than most people drink in a lifetime. And I gave it all away. What an idiot.
Well, there was a situation in 2010 in Belfast, Ireland, where
God.
I guess
you
got into it. You got into it with a fan? Yeah, I've been digging.
Yeah, man. Stupid people, they get drunk and out of line, and people can act very comfortable. That's why people have bodyguards and security. I never had a bodyguard. I never hired personal security or nothing. I have a pretty good restraint, but in that moment, I had lost it because I had a $380 raw silk shirt on. and this guy came up with a Sharpie, and he thought that the lid was on it, but he tapped me like, "Excuse me," and every time he touched me, there was a big ink ring that went just spread through my shirt. And I looked down at this shirt that I love so much, and I had a Shirley Temple in my hand, and I just threw it in his face. And they called that assault. So I ended up getting took to jail. And put me in lockup with all these other people. So my idea of jail was people were going to be overly aggressive. They were going to try to, make a point out of, showing me who was boss. So I flipped the roles, and when I went in, I was like, look, if anybody's feeling froggy, this is the time to jump. And I was ready to rip out throats. And by the end of the time, about 8 hours that I was in lockup, all of them was huddled together in a corner, and I was over by myself. And I just stared at them for 8 hours, pretty much. I ain't blinked, didn't go to sleep. I just was like, if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen on my terms. And I think a lot of guys that have gone in felt kind of the same way. But they came, got me out, and I told them what was going on, and there were a bunch of other people that were in the bar, which the bar that I was in, there was a lot of people that were in the bar with me, and they came up to the jail and was like, hey, let the dude out, man. Like, he's not the problem. The other dude was the problem. And they let me out. I stayed at the hotel till we can get out of Belfast and hightail my ass back to America as quick as I can.
I mean, it's interesting because when I looked up the article, which was on Bleacher Report, it only had the other guy's side of it. And the guy was basically like, I was just trying to get an autograph, and Mark Henry started just being abusive, and he threw a drink at me and called me a little punk bitch, and then he wanted to fight me, and I didn't even know what was going on.
I said, any man that gets a drink thrown in his face and he don't throw a punch is a punk bitch. That's my exact words.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you scared the shit out of me.
Because I don't care if Mike Tyson threw a drink in my face. Mike Tyson gonna have to fight Mark Henry that day. There's no punk bitch here. And I felt like, if you man enough to, and the other thing that wasn't said in that article was, I said, before I threw the drink, I said, man, what are you doing? And he was like, oh, I'm sorry. He's like, wow, you don't have to be an asshole about it. That's what got the drink thrown in his face. If you asked 100 people in my phone, what kind of guy is Mark Henry? They're gonna say he's the nicest, most respectful, kind of stayed to himself with his people type of guy I ever met in my life.
In September of 2012, you were one of the pallbearers for Michael Clarke Duncan's funeral. I assume you guys were really close?
Very close. Whenever I went to LA, I would stay with Michael. He was a big wrestling fan, befriended me, and it was like looking in a mirror. I had never met another man that was so big and burly, that was so damn nice in my life. And like, I had never told another dude outside of my family that I loved him. And Michael, I was like, hey man, don't make this weird, because he started laughing. I said, man, I just love being around you, man. You like one of the nicest people I ever met in my life. I was like, I love you like a brother. I was like, I hope we can, stay like this forever. And he was like, and I was like, come on, man, don't make it weird. Don't make it weird. And we was tight forever till he left.
Right. And I mean, people know Michael Clarke Duncan for being the Green Mile.
Yeah, I mean, not just the Green Mile, but the Green Mile put him on the map. But Mike did so much stuff. He had so much range. He was one of the most colorful human beings ever born. You look at, the movies that he did. He did one with Will Ferrell, the race car, the Ricky Bobby, the I can't think of the name of the movie right now, but
Uh, t- t- uh, Tallahassee Nights, is that?
Talladega Nights.
Talladega Nights, yeah,
And
there you go.
that dude, man, had me in tears. Like, I mean, he was just an entertainer. You look at Armageddon. I mean, he everything that he was in, whatever scenes he was in, he stole it. And he was an actor for a short amount of time. And in a short amount of time, he did such beautiful work.
Right, he was in Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he did a bunch of films. It's just, he was, about a 10-year actor. And, I still talk to his sister. His ex, Omarosa, I still talk to. I talked to his godson and his grandson. Well, it's not his grandson, but his nephew.
Well, Michael Clarke Duncan was only 54 years old when he died.
He was relatively young.
Yeah, of a heart attack.
Yeah.
Did that worry you at all when you see so many of these big guys around you passing away so young? Is that a concern?
I mean, I sympathize with the big guy dying, but I think that health is different for everybody. It was painful to see your brother leave, but he lives on through me and family and friends.
Well, you yourself are healthy right now, but you had a lot of injuries throughout your career.
A lot.
I mean, for example, you see the movies like The Wrestler with Mickey Rourke, and there was that scene where he was like signing autographs and he's looking around, and all the old wrestlers around him are just like fucked up leg, in a wheelchair, barely able to walk and so forth.
Yeah.
How messed up did you get from wrestling?
You know what? Everything that was wrong with me was fixed. I broke my ankle. They put pins in it. Took the pins out. Ankle was fine. Had both knees done. Had both shoulders done. It's a dangerous business for something to be fake. I was able to heal up and keep it moving. I left on my own terms. When I saw that I wasn't the guy that I used to be, I got out. And it's, you know what, man? We're not built here to live forever. We're not, nobody's born to live forever. When my day comes, there will be no complaints because my ass will be dead. But the people around me will know not to be super sad. I mean, I'm sure that they're going to mourn me, but I accomplished everything that I was born to do and even more. Everything that's regarding Mark Henry is giving back, is trying to help other people aspire to the greatness that I was able to achieve. I hope that every record I ever set is broken. And so just so people can mention my name one more time. Oh, I broke Mark Henry's record. Yes. I'll be looking down on them, giving them the thumbs up.
Well, last year you actually pledged to donate your brain to CTE research after you passed. Did you get a lot of concussions during your career?
I did not. The only 3 concussions that I had, one when I played football in high school. It was mild. I got what we call getting your bell rung. I was able to walk off, never had any vomiting or any symptoms other than the fact that when they asked me what my name was, I couldn't remember my name. And then after about an hour, they were like, how many fingers am I holding up? And I was like, 1. And they were like, okay, you're all right. But the other 2 were in training when I first started wrestling. And another one, I slipped in a shower and hit my head against a wall. And I had double vision. And after about an hour, it went away. And no, those I only had one in wrestling.
Okay, so why are you donating your brain if you didn't get that many concussions?
Well, I mean, the point of donating the brain is not because you had a lot of injuries and you want people to evaluate it. They need all the brains that they can get so they can get data. And the more education there is, the more that they can probably come up with a cure for brain disease or you know, any kind. I mean, a cure would be great if they could give you some kind of vaccination for a plaque on the brain so people didn't get Parkinson's or other brain related issues. Um, that's why I'm giving my brain. Not to mention Christopher Nowinski, who is the head of the Concussion Legacy Foundation, is one of my best friends. And anything I could do to help one of my friends, and giving my brain is one of them. I'm all in.
Well, last year, Jim Cornette, who does a podcast about wrestling, made a racist comment about you.
Well, he didn't make it
He,
about me. He made it in jest, and that statement was hurtful to a lot of people, not just me. And I was expecting an apology to everybody, but that's not what he wanted to do. He didn't feel like he did anything wrong. He considered himself just being Jim, but that's on him, man. He got to live with all of that. I told you, either we fix the problem or you don't exist.
yeah, he said he's the only man I've ever known that could strap a bucket of fried chicken on his back and ride a motor scooter across Ethiopia.
Yeah, he didn't say that about me.
Or he was just saying in general
He
about black people?
he was saying that about a wrestler that was on Power, which
Hmm.
was another wrestling show altogether.
Okay. Do you feel that there's a lot of racist elements in wrestling?
There's a lot of racist elements in hip hop. There's a lot of racist elements in culinary arts, which I love cooking and I love food. I always have to bring something back to food, baby. Um, but you know what, man? You just have to live with it and deal with it. Try to make it better for the people around you, and just keep on with your life. If you dwell on the negative, I love salacious gossip. I love it. I'm entertained by it. But you're asking me questions where the salacious gossip didn't apply to me, and I have to answer it the way that I'm answering it. So it's known that, one, I step up to issues, and if it was something that was directed directly at me, you would already know the answers.
Well, you had a 21-year career. You were in WrestleMania, you were in Royal Rumble, you were in SummerSlam, Survivor Series, a bunch of pay-per-view events. Uh, why did you finally retire in 2017?
I saw myself on camera wrestling one day, and I wasn't the guy that I thought I was. I wasn't the guy that I was used to seeing handle people the way I moved differently. And I decided that if I'm not going to be the guy that I used to be, then I don't want people seeing a watered down product. And, thus my exit. But because of my education and because of my exposure to the business and being on the real inner of the business, I was able to take roles where I mentored and worked in development. I've helped our talent relations department. I've helped our, uh, um, the educational programming. So I found other ways to be helpful, and I don't have to get hit to do it.
Hmm. How did it feel to make it to the Hall of Fame?
Making it to the Hall of Fame is validation. Is mostly for everybody else. It's not for me. I My film tells you who I am. But for my fans, I thank all of them because a lot of what I did for them. And I thought about them when I retired because I knew there were people that were hurt that I retired, that they weren't going to see me again. But I wanted them to remember me the way that I was and not, um, a lesser mobile, a less strong version of what they saw me as. And I'm comfortable with it.
Throughout your career, you have these rivalries and these grudges and so forth, but these are storylines that a group of writers comes up with. Are there people in the wrestling world that you really had a beef with in real life?
You know what? None that didn't get resolved. I'm real lucky. Well, I mean, there was one guy, Ahmed Johnson, who I never got along with, but he wasn't going to change. And like I said, if I have a problem with you, I get rid of the problem. I'm not going to tie concrete around your ankles and throw you over a bridge, but I don't never have to speak to you again. You don't have to be in my world. And more people need to have that philosophy.
I agree. Great way to look at it. All right. Well, Mark Henry, hell of a story, man, and congratulations.
Thank you, man.
Coming from a small town in Texas to becoming a big name all around the world to wrestling fans, making the Hall of Fame, strongest man in the world, like a bunch of accolades that will live on for a very long time. And throughout it all, I could see a humbleness. I don't see an ego.
It was God, man. It was God. I'm telling you, a man can't do what's been done for me and give what I've given. Like the whole cycle of life is to exist, to carve out a path to help somebody else and get somebody else to achieve what you've achieved. I've done what I was supposed to do. If I left tomorrow, I will be a success.
Right now we're in the middle of the whole coronavirus epidemic. And leave it to Florida to designate as pro wrestling to be an essential business. When you heard that, being the WWE Hall of Famer that you are, what did you think?
I thought that it was great because in pro wrestling, let's go back to the Civil War. During the Civil War, when they were signing the treaties and the war was coming to an end, Ulysses Grant entertained the brass from the North. And he said, "Excuse the way everything looks around here. We had wrestling last night." In Vietnam, there were guys that did makeshift wrestling to entertain themselves. Even as back as World War I and II, there was always wrestling. And why would Vince McMahon be the one during an adverse time say, "Nah, I know wrestling has survived. I'm going to just pull back and rest"? No, you got to push forward. There's a lot of wrestling fans in this world. And there's some people that look at wrestling like it's lowbrow entertainment. But for the people that do love it, it's essential to their peace of mind. It's essential to their spirit and having something to look forward to. Here I am on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I look forward to those days because I know that there's going to be pro wrestling on TV.
There you have it. Mark Henry, appreciate you coming in, and all the best to you.
Thank you, Vlad. I find you entertaining as hell, man. I want you on Not a Sports Show.
I'm there whenever you need me.
All right. Got a
That's how we do it.
confirmation.
My man. Peace.
Peace.